Hello everyone and welcome back to another video.
Now, this is my below test bench. It's where all of the previous testing was done and where I would still insert any GPUs that come through the door up until now. I've had no problems with it and do think it's not the worst looking setup either. What do you guys think of it? Let's start by running through the specs really quickly. The case is Thermaltake's Core P3 Snow Edition. There's an Asus Strix X99 gaming motherboard, a Core i7 6800K that's overclocked to 4 GHz across all 6 cores, with a Hyper 212 Evo to cool it, 32 GB of Corsair's Vengeance memory ticking at 2400 MHz. Then there's about 2.5 TB of combined storage between M.2 and SATA SSD drives, and all of this is powered by a fully modular Corsair RM850 power supply. Let's evaluate current spec by throwing in a 3070 Ti, run some games, but first, let's check CPU performance in Cinebench R20, where the 6800K managed 2920 points. How about some Red Dead at 4K resolution? I've pushed the slider all the way to the right, and that set the majority of settings to either Ultra or High, but I've left the DLSS turned off. Arriving peacefully, for once, to Valentine, and where we saw the train an average of 54 FPS. The GPU is being fully utilised and the CPU hovered around 50% usage mark. Game looked beautifully and also ran very smoothly, and I've not noticed any significant drops. Fast forward nearly 200 years and welcome to Cyberpunk 2077. Cranking up the settings all the way to the right once again, but this time with the DLSS on auto, I went for a quick blast. Here, the test bench pushed nearly 40 FPS on average. Similar to what we saw earlier, the 3070 Ti is utilised fully and the CPU saw around 50% usage.
I think we would all agree that this system is more than capable of running even the most demanding latest titles, especially when paired up with a modern GPU. But hear me out. Because of my recent purchases, such as this lovely 3080 Ti, I feel in order to get the most out of this card and not bottleneck it, we absolutely have to go with a more modern CPU. Secondly, the 850 watt power supply that's currently on the test bench is more than capable of driving any single GPU solution. But you know, after all, this is Nexus Tech, where running a pair of R9 295 X2s is just the thing. So I've decided it is time for a major test bench overhaul. So let's go over the parts first. As for the CPU, I went with a 10th gen Intel Core i9-10850K. Why? Well, simply, this CPU is about 4 generations newer than that's currently in the test bench. It has 4 extra cores, but most importantly, it can run at over 5 GHz, which I believe is where the games benefit the most. But let's also not run away from the fact that this CPU is still made on Intel's 14nm process, and they do tend to run quite hot. And here's why. I've chosen to go with a Asus ROG Strix LC360 all-in-one cooling solution, which I hope is going to keep this beast cool. Also, I went for a white version, hopefully matching the, aesthetics for the Core P3 here. As for the motherboard, I went with Asus Prime Z490A, which I believe is a perfect balance between not paying too much, also overpaying for features I won't be able to use. In some respects, this is going to be, or could be considered as a bit of a downgrade. So the existing Strix X99 Gaming, for example, has the LCD postcode checker, which is missing on this new motherboard, which I'm going to miss because, I'll be honest with you, it helped me to diagnose a couple of issues when trying the different GPUs over the months that I've done some testing with. Now this motherboard also has one additional NVMe slot for a solid state drive, which in this case is going to be the Samsung Evo 970 2TB drive. For all of the upcoming benchmarks, I need to install loads of games, and I feel you can never have enough solid state drive storage. Now I've managed to purchase this motherboard, the CPU and 16 gigs of memory for just under £400 on eBay, which is roughly about 525 USD, which I feel is not too bad of a deal. Let me shuffle the boxes a bit. Next on the list was the power supply, and as you can probably tell, I went all in. This is Corsair's top-end AX1600i. Should be able to drive any GPU combination I can think of. Also, being digital, I'm hoping that this is going to provide me with some interesting stats, which are going to be much needed for any testing going forwards. And with all of that, I really hope you're as excited as I am for this. I, for one, cannot wait to see how this turns out, see what the result is, but there's plenty that I need to do. Let me put some music on and crack on with this.
First, let's take out major components such as the GPU, unplug all of the power cables and remove the power supply. Then, we can take out the Strix X99 motherboard. Working on the Core P3 is always a pleasure, although I've left the temper glass back in its box for ease of use. All of the SATA SSDs are next. Let's also not forget to remove this fixer upper DYI radiator bracket. Let's install the new motherboard.
And that is the new motherboard in. I must admit, I absolutely love the white/black combo, and I feel aesthetically this is going to be really much more pleasing to the eye than with the X99. Although, frankly, what do we care about aesthetics? As I mentioned, the bundle came with 16 gigs of this DDR4 memory. I've obtained another pair of totaling up to 32, which I feel should be more than plenty for all of the testing. Next step should be installing the power supply and route all the cables. We also need to supply power to the SSDs that are going to be mounted at the back, because this slot is all going to be taken by the 360 all-in-one liquid cooler. Alright then, let me crack on further. Ooh. And there it is. That's the 1600 watts of pure madness. Included in the box are these color stripes. Who needs a manual for their power supply, right? It says now. Surprisingly not too weighty, but just, I mean, seriously. Let's take a look at this ridiculous outputs that this power supply offers. I love the little badge in the top of the power supply. One important change from the old power supply, you no longer have the standard kettle lead to power this beast, but rather it comes with this oddly shaped, I need to Google the name for this, beefy cable. That's what I call it, the beefy cable. Right, let's see. Now when your power supply comes with a flipping bell, you know they mean business. It would be lovely to get white cables, but I'm not going to go down that route. I do not simply wish to spend upwards of £70 just to, you know, match the braid of these cables with the build. While it's nice to look at, nah.
Routing of all power cables was next, and this monster power supply is capable of delivering up to 10 4-pin power connectors. That is a lot. And of course the SATA SSDs that are now nicely hidden away.
Let's install the CPU cooler next. My table is too small, that's for sure. Welcome to Elite Republic of Gamers community. Yeah, why not? Let's just fast forward.
It has to be the most RGB I've ever seen in a product. This cooler has the looks and also should keep the i9 well under control for some heavy overclocking later.
In the meantime, I fitted the 360 rads, mounted all the fans, and I'm now in a process of routing the RGB and the actual fan headers so that we can have it all nicely lit up and also spinning. Funny enough, this motherboard actually doesn't support enough USB 2.0 headers, because remember, we've got one for the power supply, there's one for the liquid cooler, and because of this we have now lost access to the front USB 2.0 ports. About to mount the CPU cooler. So first, let me just quickly clean whatever there is left on the actual processor. Let's just quickly put some thermal paste on. Now, should we spread or should we just do a pea size? The mounting pressure should be able to spread the thermal paste evenly. But if we see poor thermal performance, we can always remove and reapply thermal paste just to see whether that actually makes sense or it doesn't really matter. So for now, it's going to be a healthy dose of, yep, that's about it. The last fastening screw. Well, that was really the most unsatisfying unboxing of memory ever. I'm pretty sure you will have no memories of unboxing of this memory. So let's now slot in the extra SSD storage, which is much needed. This 970 Evo Plus was on deal. I've managed to get this one for as little as 100, well, I say as little, this was £169. Right, situation update, and unfortunately I've been defeated. What I mean by that, as you probably see, these SSDs are just sticking because I can't actually secure them. The motherboard, which I purchased second-hand, didn't really come with any M.2 SSD standoffs. Right, and with that unfortunate defeat by the missing M.2 standoff screw, I feel I'm just going to quickly put as much work into this as I can for now, and yeah, I'm just going to have to return to this another day. I'm really not happy about that, but what can you do?
Well, and as for the result, all this work, but how does it actually perform? Let's now rerun the Cinebench R20 benchmark, and this time we are up by 98% at 5,784 points. Firing up Red Dead 2 at the same graphical settings, this time we saw 57 FPS on average, which is a very small increase. But looking at the 1% and 0.1% loads really show where the improvement have happened.
Morning, friend.
As for the Cyberpunk 2077, very similar results here. A small improvement to average, now up to 42 FPS, but even more improvements to 1 and 0.1 lows, which are really important to overall game smoothness. Now that this upgrade to my test bench is completed, I feel relieved. It really does look cool, and I even stick with the white colour across all of the RGB. I've now installed all of the games and benchmarks for future testing, so be sure to be subscribed for that, and I'm really looking forward to all of it. I realised this video was a bit longer than usual, so let me know what you think of the format in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.